Have
Good
you?
morning, Nigerians.
Morning. All right. So let's start from. I mean, you experienced and you heard the newspaper review
Right.
and the response from the reviewers. One of the papers just put it out there. Natasha kicked out.
Out.
Someone would say just like that,
Hmm.
you know. And the reviewers did say that for them it was sheer injustice, and there could have been procedures and process to go through it. What are your takes on this?
Well, first, I share the sentiments of the two of your reviewers who have just left. I think, not that I think, my position is this. For a lawmaking body as the Senate of Nigeria to have taken the decision that they took within 2 days that a matter was referred to the Ethics and Public Petitions Committee of the Senate does not in any way show seriousness, does not in any way cast our lawmaking body as a body that has fidelity, to our laws. Why do I say this? Let's separate out two issues. One is about Order 10 or 11 of the standing orders of the Senate, and the other issue is Order 40, Rule 4 of the standing orders of the Senate. Order 11 talks about it regulates when a senator can stand before in the hollow chambers and express him or herself on an issue of privilege. This is where I differ from members of the Senate. The orders and rules of the Senate are not cast in stone. As a matter of fact, if you look at the rules themselves, the rules state that rules can be set aside temporarily on the basis of two-third votes. Was that done on Monday when the issue of reallocation of seats came up? Not to my mind, it wasn't done. Two, if you look at Order 40 Rule 4, which talks about petitions, generally, if you look at the marginal note, that blank space on the right-hand side, if you look at the rules of the Senate, it talks about petitions. And if you read all through, what the rules envisage is petitions by Nigerian citizens. The rules of Senate do not envisage that a member of the Senate will file a petition against another member of the Senate. So we should not conflate the issues. Then let's go back to the question of injustice, and this is where I think we need to provide clarity. What was referred to the Ethics Committee were the shenanigans that happened on Monday, the previous Monday. And when the committee chose to sit, there was already an injunction against the Senate and the Ethics Committee. A proper lawmaking body, an institution that respects the rule of law, should have suspended its proceedings and surrender its entire proceedings and petitions to the court to adjudicate. They did not do that. Again, the principle of audiaterem patem, fair hearing, did not come into play. So on what basis did Senator Nida Imasuen's committee reach the conclusion that it reached when it chose to suspend Senator Natasha?
Sorry, I would sorry to interrupt, just to let you know that we are going to be joined in the discussion at some point in time by the Special Advisor to the President of the Senate, that's Right Honorable Eseme Eyibo, to also bring some perspective into the discussion. So let's just be on the lookout for that. Okay. Yes, I'm sorry to cut you short. Continue.
And two, this is where I have a problem with the approach of Senator Natasha. I'm taking the other aspect of the saga, the question of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is a crime. It goes beyond the purview of the Ethics Committee of the Senate. As a matter of fact, under a principle of law enunciated by the Supreme Court far back in 1985, what's his name now? Garba against University of Maiduguri. The Supreme Court held that in matters with some close proximity to crime that has, some criminal nature, administrative bodies cannot entertain them. So on the basis of Section 46 of the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, which was a law passed by Dr. Jonathan shortly before he left office in 2015, and it talks about conduct of sexual nature.
So for you, that's a matter that maybe the court and law enforcement agents should be handling.
That's a matter that Senator Natasha, if she's watching, take your petition, get in touch with your lawyers. On the basis of Section 46 of the VAP Act, as Section 285, I've seen the substance of our petition. References were made to conversations around the President of Senate's guest house in Abuja, which falls within the purview of Section 285 of the Penal Code. Penal Code is applicable in the FCT and the 19 northern states. And the Penal Code talks about indecent ingression upon the person.
So you think this is far beyond the purview of
what
the legislature should be handling?
This is far beyond the purview of the Ethics Committee of the Senate. She should write the police at one level to inquire into the circumstances in which this whole saga arose around sexual harassment. And two, there's also a limb to our accusation, which devolves around official misconduct. She should also write the ICPC. ICPC is mandated to look at official misconduct. And when all of this is done, and these bodies find some truth on the basis of their investigation.
Okay, so let's look at the gravity of the sanctions. I mean, 6 months. And then you're also looking at withdrawal of salaries. And you're also mandating her not to appear anywhere, introducing or, making attempt to introduce herself as a senator representing the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That being said, how does this also perhaps create an ambiguity of representation for her people in this period? And could that be also something she should also take to court?
I think it's Section 68 that deals with, Section 68 of the Constitution, that deals with circumstances in which a member of the House of Reps or Senate can be removed, and Section 68, 1A to H also. Suspension isn't part of those sections of Section 68. But we know that in the interpretation of our Constitution, Elena George, sitting in Abuja, had held that the Senate has no power to suspend a member beyond 14 days. 14 days. So what we are experiencing here is an attempt by a lawmaking body who stares at the face of our court and tells the court in the local parlance that we say it, waka shege. That's what the Senate has done. The Senate has no power to have suspended Senator Natasha beyond 14 days. The circumstances in which she was even suspended does not meet the smell test. And two, does not even meet the requirement of our laws. But you raise an important point, and this itself implicates the ambiguity of representation. She was sent to Abuja to represent 1 million people in a constituency in Kogi Central. If she has fallen foul of the rules, the orders, internal laws of the Senate must exercise its powers in such a way that exercise sits, with our laws. But the Senate has done that.
Okay, still talking about.
As your reviewer spoke here, the way it was rushed shows that our fate was predetermined. And don't forget, in the course of the debate in the House, the man who later sat on the panel on the Ethics Committee, that suspended her, told the world that her petition was dead on arrival.
Before even starting the conversation.
Was dead on arrival.
And one cannot be, a judge in a matter in which he has interest, and that's talking about the president of the Senate, who started and said he has never or been known to have harassed any woman. And one would think, does he think that is enough, to make such an address from there, understanding that the matter is also in court?
What complicates the position of the president of Senate, whatever he says on this matter, is his refusal to pay some fidelity to principles of law that we know. He was conflicted by the allegations made by Natasha. Let's assume that when the matter first came up last Monday, because of the fracas, so to speak, that ensued in the House, he was not in the best of mind to have grappled with this principle. But when Natasha came yesterday to resubmit the petition, what I expected the president of Senate to do, as a lawyer of 37 years, standing at the bar, was to step aside. He ought not to have admitted the petition. All he ought to have done was, having recognized Natasha and given the opportunity to speak, he would have told members of his hallowed chambers that he was stepping aside for the Deputy Senate President to oversee that proceeding on the submission of the petition and the admission of the petition, because the substance of the petition touches on his person and on his integrity, and in a way interrogates his whole position as president of Senate. He has not done that. Look, I'm trying to be charitable here.
Yeah, please do.
I can see that.
People are destroying our state institutions. People are destroying our state institutions. And it's unfortunate that a lawyer who knows what the legal principle, Latin maxim of nemo judes in causa sua means, no man can be a judge in his own case, just
it seems like the common word around here over the last couple of days in this case is ambiguity. Even here, I've heard Dora's used ambiguity. You used the word ambiguity. Newspaper reviewers have used the word ambiguity. And what's even more ambiguous is the fact that there was a court injunction on these proceedings, but it appears that the Senate still went ahead to do whatever it had to do. Does that mean that the Senate doesn't necessarily have to obey the court, or what does the Constitution or what does the law say on this?
No institution is above the law in our country. No institution is above the Constitution. We are talking of the issue of fundamental right to fair hearing here, which is protected by Section 36 of our Constitution. And don't forget that the Constitution that we're operating now was a military decree passed into what we have by this same Senate, refusing to pay fidelity to the Constitution. For me, is too grave for anybody not to contemplate. But on a wider issue, I'm even more worried by the illogics that we now find, in the public space. You find former senators, saying that once you become a senator, you are no longer subject to sexual harassment. You have a former senator, pushing the illogic of cheapness, that it is cheap for a senator to say that she's been sexually harassed.
And then one put up ageism.
Cheap, that sometimes the cheapness arises from the way, women present themselves. These statements.
One also mentioned ageism, a sitting senator as well.
Ageism. These statements are ludicrous. Coming from Senator Florence Itagiwa, coming from Senator Remi Tinubu, I find this statement shocking. What they are doing is distorting the sight of women's political action. We may not see the effects today, but in times to come, you will see Nigerian women chuckling into their homes and making reference, that biblical reference, to your tent, O Israel.
But it was also Senator Retikingibe who appended a signature to the suspension signature.
That's the irony of it. I would have thought that for a senator who comes from the opposition, there would have been a whip line. There would have been a whip line.
And the chairperson of the Women in Parliament.
There would have been a whip line drawn by the opposition party. Nothing of such was done. In fact, reference to the Ethics Committee, was seconded by Senator Abamoro, who is the leader of the opposition in the Senate. So it tells you that party oppositional politics has collapsed, in the legislative bodies of our country, House of Reps and Senate. And two, those we elect and send to Abuja are not there to represent the collective interest of their constituents.
Isn't this instrument of suspension now a weapon of rascality by the legislature to silence opposition?
It appears it is. If you look at what happened to the senator from Borno South in Dume, and if you look at what has happened to a number of senators, you are thrown out temporarily out of the chambers. Your salaries are suspended, including salaries of your aides and all that. And you are made to apologize before you are admitted, before you are subsequently admitted to the chambers. When these people come back, let us just take a track of their legislative activities. You no longer hear them speak. In fact, I've not heard Udume's voice, above the cacophony of what we see and hear. I've not heard his voice. I've not heard Ningi's still in the Senate. I think he's still there. So for me, is an instrument of terror deployed by the leadership of our National Assembly to cow those who do not fall, in line. It's even worse for youngsters, like Natasha, who come with a different
kind of politics, yes.
Who are unbridled by the politics of governance in our country, who try to merge the advocacy of the streets with...
Like a political reformer.
Yeah.
Perhaps. What do you make of those who say, because you've just mentioned, we've just mentioned a number of senators that have either appended signatures or said one or two things in support of probably what is done. Some people will say, well, look, that's just an example of the fact that a lot of the senators are generally unhappy with what Senator Natasha has done.
Well, if they are unhappy, their unhappiness is not born out of the politics of our advocacy. It is born out of what I describe as biological politics. And I will firm my position on the basis of a remark made by a senator of the Federal Republic who tried to cast aspersion on the character and reputation of Natasha by alleging that this is a woman that has 6 children for 6 men.
And what does that have to do with anything?
For 6 men. I find it extremely ridiculous that a sitting senator can make such remark on the character and reputation of another sitting senator. But he also raises the point, can these men, really beat their chest and say that I've kept fidelity to my relationship? I know of 3 sitting senators who have baby mamas, outside their marriages.
Just 3? I think there are more.
In Abuja. In Abuja. It is not my business to inquire into...
in fact, it really shouldn't be anybody's business, really.
It's a domestic affair and family life.
A scholar, Judy Butler, wrote extensively on the performativity of the woman body. The woman owns her body and controls her body. It is not your business if she begets
or has
children,
five baby daddies.
For 6 men. But it shows the depth, right in the gutter that our Senate has plumbed.
And perhaps also the overbearing nature of the patriarchy at the level of the legislature.
I wrote a piece, which has gone viral, on Itagiwa's flawed perspective.
Yes, I read that.
And I argued that because our society is patriarchally driven and our structure is masculinist and patriarchal in nature. The dynamics of power, creates an unequal relationship between man and a woman. And once a woman raises an allegation, the responsibility of the patriarchal structure is to silence that woman. It happened just last November here. And create patriarchal queens. A private in the Nigerian army, Ruth Ogunleye, accused a general and 2 colonels of sexual harassment. What happened? She was dismissed from the army. The question I ask, do our institutions have policy on sexual harassment? If they do, they will have more considered ways of approaching these allegations. And the second question I asked the Senate, yes, the number of women are few, but you also have women who work for the National Assembly. Is there a policy, public policy, on sexual harassment in the National Assembly? We do not. But I think the allegation of Natasha is important because we are dealing with 2 senators here. In the context of performative politics, they are equal, 2 equal senators in the chambers of the Senate of the National Assembly.
So what do you think is going to happen from here? You think that Natasha should just go cool off, serve 6 months and come back or write an apology, as they say?
I will increase the stakes. I will increase the stakes.
How?
How do you do that? Write the police and ICPC, even if we know that both institutions are weak. The purpose that some of us human rights lawyers
just write regardless
go to court is
not because you're really going to get justice.
It's usually not to win because we know we'll not get justice. But we do this to test the efficacy and effectiveness of our law and of our institution. She should approach both institutions. As a matter of fact, under Section 24 of the Police Act, the police ought not to wait for any petition to be written, to them. We have an Inspector General of Police who is following this saga, and he has the power to invite the President of Senate to come and answer allegations that have been made against him in the public space. The President of Senate does not have any immunity. His immunity begins and ends within the precinct of the legislative chambers.
Well, he thinks he has a high-ranking service position that is equal to imperial free freedom because if you ask a lot of people, the demeanor of the President of the Senate is one who seems untouchable. And when you look at the procedure that the Ethics Committee took, there was no mention of the petitioned, only the petitioner.
Yeah.
So in going forward, I hear you say, right, make an attempt regardless of, the weakness of the institution. But again, we are hoping that, this sort of tragedy for some people does not mean that the rest of the women who also have cases and have accusations will be silenced further, because that's a danger. There's a danger in that, isn't there?
Like I said earlier, what the average Nigerian woman who will in future face circumstances of this nature would think is, in the context of averageness as a citizen, I do not have the power, the prestige, the reputation, and the brand that Natasha represents. And she was dealt with in the most shambolic way. A Nigerian woman that cannot command all of the attributes that I have mentioned will have only one option open to her. Run back to the closet of her bedroom, sulk, and cry. That's a danger. And there is another danger. If we do not put a handle on this, we would have succeeded in distorting the sight of women's political action.
Okay, I think on that instructive note, we're just going to have to wrap it up for now. I mean, it's just gone past the second hour of Kaakaki, the African Voice, and you know how we normally do it at this time. We bring you Kaakaki Socials. Abdul, again, many thanks for your time and useful insight. We'll take a short break when we come back. We will bring you Kaakaki Socials.
Absolutely. No, Bezek will bring us.